and that'll help drive, how many times have we built social login? Or how many times have we had to build a specific widget? Imagine now when the requirements are coming in, if we can say, hey, for this small unit of work, it's very similar, or what can we do to match what we've done in the past? So that we can say, hey, maybe that might be a candidate for reuse, or a candidate to be able to tap into finding people that know how to build that software or done that software in the past. Or maybe it could recommend, hey, in the past we've done this in Java, Node.js, and in .NET, and we've had more success in .NET for these reasons. We can start being very proactive with how we develop software by being able to really think about what we've done in the past and being smart about how we're doing in the future. Price is another big area. If you think about Topcoder, we have a marketplace, so we can use AI to help with analytics around pricing the cost of work, depending upon the technology, the timelines, recommend it to customers, be very transparent on both the community side and on the member side, on the customer side, on how we move forward. The other piece we are looking at, just like with the circuits, where the circuits are using AI to do fault detection, things of that nature. Imagine, quality assurance. There'll be huge advances in AI looking at software development. Already today at Topcoder, we can utilize, as Rosh was saying earlier, check marks to do static code analysis. We use Black Duck for some IP infringement, looking at those type of features. SonarQube for other features. We can plug in different quality assurance, as well as looking at our own ways of predicting quality. We track every piece of code goes through a code review process where we have tons of data on code review, over 17 years worth. And then lastly, when you start thinking of references, now that we have this code and you start AI, so we're gonna be able to say, hey, these people have done it before. Here's spots where it can be done. How is it performed? It could help with compensation. It could help with these units of work have been done here. We should allow other people to do it. One of I think the problems with reuse in general is people don't want to necessarily share the code because they can't be compensated correctly, or they can't be recognized. As we look at automation with continuous integration deployment, we'll be able to kind of hash code, know where it's been reused, know where it should be reused, know who worked on it, when it's changed. So I think the attribution methods of software development will be changing in the near future as well. And then lastly is health checks. So when you look at your project, knowing, I'm sure everyone's been there, where your project ends on, say, 3 days from now, and people are still adding lines of code at a ferocious pace. 3 days from now, your project's not really going to be done on time. So imagine looking at the rate of lines of code being added to a project. How often, how many test cases are being added to the project, your percent test coverage, using AI to predict the health of your project. When is your project going to be go off the rails? How is it going to be? What's the quality going to be? We'll have all these metrics that we can start tracking and looking at a project basis, where we can augment AI with our human resources to improve the overall quality of software. One last with the blockchain. So we have been investigating with blockchain. So we now have a prototype up with blockchain. Blockchain works, everything from know your customer, know your members, so knowing who's working on your work, who's participating. The whole appellate process, being able to do this all with smart contracts, move faster, more transparent, going back to why Topcoder was founded. We'll be able to take the code, put it out to the community from a client standpoint, set up the contract, manage appellate processes by sending out the questions and issues to multiple people, being able to take that back in, and then closing out the contract, basically all in the blockchain, so in a very transparent, trustable fashion where everyone will know what is occurring. So we have a few prototypes of that up and running now too. Then lastly, I think a couple of things. This is a Tesla dashboard. I think, when you start thinking about how people are managing software development, it'd be nice to have a better version of dashboard. You don't manage hours, you're not managing individual resources. Imagine like what we do today is we have continuous integration. So quickly being able to deploy on a daily basis, being able to see what's happening, see how the code's working, how the test cases being run, we track our resources today, not on hours, but how often are they delivering on time? Well, how often are they delivering quality solutions? And then also looking at capacity. Again, I'm not worried about hours or things of that nature. Is how quickly can I, where am I? Can I flood the community with more work? Can I add more resources? I think coming up with new dashboards of how we manage resources will be what we're focused on. So lastly, I want to end with one quick slide here on topcoder and fruit flies. So not the members are not our fruit flies. So I say our challenges of the fruit flies. But a fruit fly lives its entire life in 10 days. So it's the #1 spot where people look and do research is why they use fruit flies. So what's the future hold? I don't know if any of us know. I think we have some ideas and some guesses. Going back to the Amazon talk this morning where he said fail fast. That's what's great about Topcoder is that we can run challenges, within 7-10 days. We run challenges in 24-hour life cycles. It gives us the ability to try new things, tweak things, get feedback. There's actually been over 700 academic citations on Topcoder. So we work a lot with researchers on studying software development. So, I don't know what the future is going to end up being, but I know between the ability to leverage our customers, leverage our roughly 1.4 million community, we'll have tons of great ideas, and we have the infrastructure and the process to move extremely fast and experiment and fail fast so that we can keep tweaking the model to constantly improve and get to where the future is going. So that's it for me. If I got a few more minutes, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take a few questions or talk over the lunch break. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate it. I told you guys he was that smart. He answered all the questions you had. So, Dave, great job. Round of applause again for Dave. So next up, I'm privileged to bring to the stage one of the individuals who I had the pleasure of meeting last year. Is a new customer of ours, and we've done some phenomenal work. And as I said, I go to a lot of events and I meet with a lot of different executives. This is probably one of my favorite stories to tell about how this relationship came to fruition. But I'll let him give you all those details. So please welcome to the stage the lead business strategist, advanced analytics and emerging technologies at Anadarko Petroleum Corporation, Jose Silva. There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it. Can you hear me? Perfect. The first question we had is what type of song I was going to get on the way in. So we were wondering if it was going to be Despacito or something like this. Anywho, what the team asked me to talk about was a little bit of what we've been doing together, not only with Topcoder, but in the context of open innovation. So I have a long title there. I work for Anadarko Petroleum. We're an energy company. So I'll walk you first through a couple of the things that we do as a company, why we felt the need to not only start a team like the one we have today, but then also why we started an open innovation initiative that included a crowdsourcing effort. So with that in mind, really anywhere where you see here a dot, we operate. This is one of those things that as an energy company, we're always exploring, we're always trying to find where hydrocarbons might be placed in order to not only make revenues in that way, but create value for our shareholders. So in the context of a technology organization, what we try to do is not necessarily create new goals for the company, but enabling them, right? So enabling them means, for example, for 2018, our goals were somewhere around execute what we told our shareholders we were going to do on their costs in a safe manner. Very simple. So the vision for our group, which is, and we love, we're acronyms, so our acronym is AIT, is to accelerate the way that we do all those things through technology. And the way that we've been through this path for the last 2 years, we started a team in early 2017 through a lot of efforts internal and also external push to really in the energy industry, how are we going to start adopting or ingesting a lot of these technologies that exist out there? So far, we've done it through these two buckets, if you see down here below. So we found that we had to create a lot of foundational components that enable us or allow us to go ahead and do these things. And then on the right-hand side is how do we engage with our company? And then also, how do we engage with the ecosystem? Because we believe that if we try to figure these things on our own, we're not going to go as fast as we need to. So from my foundational components perspective, this means, can we have the best algorithms? Whatever that means. And can we find ways of measuring those things? Can we make sure that we utilize every single piece of, in this case is referred as cloud computing, but can we really scale up all of the things that we have going on? And in some instances, it just feels like pulling out, dial-up cord from a wall and installing Wi-Fi routers. So is how do we go and start utilizing things that are already more improving in other verticals? How do we make sure that we augment the capabilities of our subject matter experts at the company? A lot of our organizations will have expertise that has accumulated over the years. How do you make sure that that expertise can then not only understand, educate themselves, but then also augment whatever we're asking them to do through all of these technologies? And lastly, how do you do it fast? Amazon gave a pretty nice way of doing it. And how do you learn from others so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel? And through that, it's one thing that we found out pretty quickly was we need to find ways for people to really engage with us internally. And we're doing that at the moment through these three ways: platforms, emerging technologies, and open innovation. Platform for us means every time there's a new widget, it does not create value until it really goes to the hands of everyone in your corporation. So it doesn't matter if you have the best algorithm that can automate a specific spreadsheet, for example, if it doesn't get to the hands of my engineers. So the best way to do that is through a platform. And we have different platforms. There are a lot of SaaS models out there in the market, as you can imagine. So we try to make a balance on how many and which ones will actually have scale within our corporation. Second one is emerging technologies. And that's everything about what is either out there off the shelf. Think IoT. We are not a software company. We're certainly not a hardware organization. We can buy it, but how do we make sure that we partner with companies that have the best technology or have access to the best technology, whether because they did this in other industries and they're bringing it now to ours, or is because we want to build these things together. So we have a portfolio of companies that we work with at the moment in the startup domain. And I have one case study towards the end, and a second one I can refer to, and we use crowdsourcing actually to look for startups. It's not necessarily a software process, but it's very similar to the way that we build software if we had to that way. And last but not least, open innovation. And the best way to talk about the open innovation aspect is to really give you a more detailed picture of those three buckets: platforms, emerging technologies, and open innovation. On the platform side, at the moment, we have several on the engineering side: geoscience, market intelligence. So those things, as I mentioned, those are just ways or means to, from a widget, how are you going to deploy it? In the context of crowdsourcing, every time we put a challenge for a specific problem statement, it all starts from an idea. And one of the ways that we define innovation at the moment is innovation is taking those ideas and executing them. In finding a way or learning how you're going to create processes internally that allows you to go as fast as you can, because if you haven't done it before, I assure you, you will find some bottlenecks here and there. Whether those are commercial or legal, those are things, as many of the questions that have come up around intellectual property and things like that, and NDAs, MSAs, those are things that you'll find ways of accelerating through how you get a widget into the rest of your corporation. But then the other thing is, how do you leverage then again everything that's out there? And that's the piece of emerging technologies that's second. Which cloud provider, which IoT company, which widgets that will allow you to measure higher frequency, higher rates of data coming into your systems so that you can make better decisions at the end of the day. Effectively, you're trying to influence decision making. That's if you're making a decision either faster or you're making a better decision that allows to bring more value, then technology, you're actually enabling technology to make a better decision in that regard. And last but not least, open innovation. And from our perspective, we had a lot of learnings, and Steve will share here after I go on how our industries are trying to collaborate with each other so that, again, we don't reinvent the wheel. Whether in our case, I have listed here a Protocol and a Darko Ideas, but it's how do you cast a wide net that allows you to then find out what are the things that you need to send to the crowd. Once you have these ideas, which aspects of those ideas do you actually post in the crowd? How do you then bring them in and integrate them with your system? And that has to do with IT, for example, or it has to do with all the security components that previous presentations were talking about. So there are a ton of learnings there on the open innovation side. But let me describe a little bit of what we do today from an internal perspective, and then how do we leverage the open innovation side to complement what we have here. So our group, it's a group of about 100 people. It's 50 people is full-times. This continues to vary. It is more of a learning and it's an adapting type strategy at the moment. The core group builds these widgets that I was talking about. There's a data ops, DevOps organization that focuses on getting those widgets into a platform so that it can scale and these widgets get to the hands of the people. But really, how do you leverage everything that's external? That's a business strategy group. That's a group that I get to lead. And with this domain here, we have a portfolio of about, let's say, 30-something projects going on today. They are at capacity. And with the hypothesis that we only know what we know, how do I make sure that these individuals are building the best algorithms to solve these problems? Because certainly we have our own data, we have our own expertise. So I think someone today talked about silos. This piece of organization is quite siloed so that we can think about going fast. And they use agile mode. We have a floor that enables the collaboration component. So there are a lot of ingredients that actually help us execute this piece of the business. But then without bringing something like this is really where you start augmenting the capabilities of an organization that you have internally or just the rest of your business units. So let me put it in context with some stats here. So far, what we do is any projects or ideas that our team cannot execute due to bandwidth, or that we want to make sure that are they at the right level, or we want to just solve things that it's not core to our group, we go ahead and take a look at a crowdsourcing project, for example, amongst other things within the open innovation team. So far, we've captured around 39 of these ideas in the last year. We've done over 300 challenges. There's an average cost there. And of course, these things vary a lot. There are challenges they have been challenges that are very economical, very, very quick and inexpensive. And there are some others on the data science side that have taken a little bit longer time, and that also the cost is a little bit different than that. So with that, though, it's all about why are you bringing these ideas to the table as well. So the ROI here, it's difficult to measure because these things are not apples to apples. So whether you're talking about man hours saved or you're talking actually about influencing decision making, it's going to be critical as we continue to build a portfolio around which ideas we actually not only execute ourselves internally, but also we augment with the power of the crowd. And it's really two things: is can I have a better, let's call it algorithm, but can I have access to a better talent pool out there that can, in return, give me a better process, a better solution that otherwise, in a silo, we would have never known that we had access to. And then at the end of the day, we end up owning it. And then on the second piece is, can I do it in a fast manner and hopefully in a more economical way? The idea of this two concept is, so far we've seen enough to be on the optimistic view that this will continue to maybe not necessarily cannibalize the types of projects that we do in-house, but actually go much wider within the organization. And at the moment, these are slides that we present in our own energy forums, where we sit down next to our peer groups and they're asking us, are you really taking open innovation this seriously? Are you truly believing that the gig economy and it's going to influence or it's going to affect our organizations to the level that you're seeing it today? And at the moment, we believe if our organizations do not take part into this type of model would actually be left behind to some regard, because we will have more difficulty finding good talent, and we will have more difficulty actually building better products as we move forward. So we've done this with about 4 people, and this expresses a little bit of what type of structure do you require, and it's very nimble. And it continues to, you can change it, you should adapt it to what are your company goals. This is a very specific case. And in this one, I'll give you, it's around Motlogs. I'm an engineer, so it's hard for me not to have some numbers or something very technical in one of these slides. But I'll spare you the reading process here, and I'll just share. A Motlog is a way of really finding whether there are hydrocarbons in a specific area. It's usually done through a log. A log is some data that is acquired through a well. But in the United States alone, there are millions of these things from historical time, really. And there are plenty databases out there, some of them public, some not. But these things are very cheap, and they exist in most people's, most energy companies' databases, but you have to read through them manually. They are old, they are handwritten, and I believe there's an animation here. They're built with codes because why not, right? I want to stick more information there, so in the past we'll just put a lot of acronyms that even I would not know how to go through it. So the question from our geoscientists today, for example, is, look, how do I, like in real estate, imagine if you had to buy a house in a city and you had to go and manually read and obtain somehow each of the details from each of the houses that are available in the market. So the way that we wanted to do it is, could we have an algorithm that actually could go through all of them, and as new ones come in, it gets aggregated and spit out something like you see on the map at the bottom right-hand side of the slide, in a way that can really quickly tell us if there's any interest in that particular area. This is the prospectivity that we can find. This is a tool for explorationists. This is a tool that really accelerates the things that we could do. So we said, sure, can we solve this internally? So we did an internal hackathon. We had at that moment, we had about 10 data scientists in the company. We put all our data scientists in the company, we gave them a couple of pizzas for a day, and we said, hey, try to unlock this process. And what they quickly came back to us was like, look, this is not a single challenge, if I put it in that same nomenclature. These are plenty challenges. And there's no way that we're going to be able to solve this in not only one day, but it's going to take us several pieces. Because if you look at that picture in the middle from far away, and we purposely made it this way so that you didn't have to focus on things that make no sense, is you have different aspects of the picture there, right? This is not cat versus dog. This is more about squiggly line versus at what depth, or versus numbers versus code versus things that are being scanned. So there's so many different algorithms that actually have to work together to make this work. So our team said, yeah, no, this is our main priority, because this is going to take a lot of time and most of the bandwidth that we have today. So what we said is like, look, this is a great process for crowd. If we can break this in different challenges, then we can individually send those out and start getting solutions and putting all those ingredients to solve the problem. And we did. It's something that I hope we'll be able to share more publicly. We'll put it on YouTube first and things like that. But it took us around 10 challenges. You see the numbers there, plenty of participants. And it took us a while to get all of the ingredients together. So this was also for us a learning path on how to execute on a project like this. And I can tell you that from a learning perspective, this was algorithm based only. We didn't build a UI. We didn't put any of those things on top of it, because what we really wanted to do is, can you just extract data that we didn't have before? With that in mind, I believe this takes me a little bit to closing thoughts. But now that I have a couple of more minutes, let me share a little bit on how we scout for emerging technologies and use a similar concept than crowdsourcing. So you've heard today IoT, blockchain, AI, more than a couple of times. As an industry, and being the emerging technology person in the company, you could imagine a lot of different startups reach out, companies and the people with services saying, hey, I have the latest and greatest. And it's really difficult to really filter that in a way that you're actually making sure that you're making the best decision of selecting and picking the right organizations to work with. So we don't play in that arena. If someone reaches out from a cold in a cold email that we've had no contact with, we respectfully probably will not include it within our process because it's just too difficult and there's no way for us to sift through that. So what we do is then we interact with venture capital groups. And you'll imagine, well, why venture capital groups? Because they're the ones that are actually making investments and they're making decisions for that. So we figure we now have a network of close to 30 venture capital friends and family, we call them. We have very personal relationships with them, and we do not invest. All we say is, we go in and we say, look, can you share what investments you've made in the last quarter? And they're very good at saying, hey, I have one IoT company, one blockchain company, and one analytics company, and so on and so forth. From there, we say, okay, what do you make an investment on this IoT company? They go like, oh, we love their management team. They have a patent. They have this intellectual property, and you will love working with them. And then the next question we usually ask is, who are the competitors? And then they give us a list because guess what? They made their homework, or at least we're supposed to, because they're putting more than a couple $1 million on a lot of these things. So the next thing we do is then we take a look at the competitor list, which are not hundreds anymore, like the emails that we receive. It's more on the tens. And we then research who made investments on those companies. And then we go to venture capital number 2, and we ask, hey, we noticed you made an investment on this particular IoT company. Tell us a little bit about it. And they go, oh, we love their management team. This is the IP, these are the patents, and this is why you should work with them. So long story short, we end up with a very refined list of companies to actually go ahead and work with. And not only that, we've built a relationship with venture capital groups that then allows us to make sure that those things will scale, right? So it's how do you take an idea and execute it? Effectively, what we're doing is just crowdsourcing other people's filter mechanisms so that we end up with a curated list. So what have we learned is that in either of those 2 case studies, we need processes. And we didn't start with processes, and we paid the consequences quite quickly. By processes is something very similar than the presentation that was before me by the gentleman at Amazon, where you have to really figure out which way matches the culture of your organization to execute on these ideas, or how are you going to refine and find ways of executing on these ideas. Communication across team is a little bit more about make sure that the right stakeholders are in place. We found a way of now making sure that we have a legal counsel ready for us, and they know that we have the crazy ideas. We are the crazy ideas team. So every time we bring up something, they know what intellectual property means. They know what the cloud means. And they made it sound funny, but one of the first meetings we had with our legal counsels were like, could you please define where is the cloud? Or what is the cloud first, and then where is it? Because, by the way, some of our data licensing agreements say data shall not leave our premises. If we put this data in the cloud, is that outside our premises? And we had to go ahead and redefine and renegotiate those things, right? So those were barriers of entry that we could not have predicted ever in the context of like, look, I'm going to implement and get a technology organization that's going to use some data, put it either in crowdsourcing projects, or actually I'm just going to put it in the cloud. It's not that simple necessarily, but it's absolutely doable. It's just a matter of building a process, involving the stakeholders, and make sure that it's properly resourced, but it doesn't require a huge staff. It's not about the large G&A component. It's more about what is the right skill set that you need at that time in your digital transformation journey. And it might be that you need a generalist, or it might be that you need project management support. So challenges will continue to be, because we don't think we figure out this one. This is something that we'll continue to learn from other industries or from our own failures, is on the learning curves. What does it mean to do this within a new organization and the change management components within our company? And as we continue to find what we're saying here as unconventional solutions, how do we continue to augment the capabilities of our people? We're in the business of responding to our shareholders, and it's how do we enable that? Not necessarily how do we create new business verticals within our company. So we have restarted our effort with regards to open innovation. We have a new lead. We're really trying to make sure that we have the proper ingredients. And what I'll argue is do those exercises beforehand. Don't try to just jump to it from a lessons learned perspective. And as we continue to learn, hopefully we'll continue to share as well. But with that, I'll stop here and maybe open up the floor for a couple of questions. Thank you very much. Awesome. Let's call it out. Thanks.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Jose. Very insightful and enlightening. And now you probably understand why I say talking about Anadarko is sort of my favorite case studies and customer use cases that I like to talk about and reference. So moving right along, we have one more presentation and then we're going to go right into lunch. So up next, that is not my slide. Sorry about that. Up next is the Deputy Manager for the Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation at NASA and a huge fan of Topcoder. I'm just waiting on my personal invite to make it to NASA from Steve because a few of my colleagues have gotten it. Please welcome to the stage, Steve Rader.
Thank you, and you are formally invited now, so bring it on. This is really an honor to be here and to be with folks that are really passionate about this. About 10 years ago, my brother, who worked for IBM, started bugging me that I needed to read this book, Crowdsourcing by Jeff Howe, and he kept bugging me about it, and I finally read it, and immediately saw that the world has changed. And in that book, Topcoder is featured, Kareem Lakhani at Harvard is featured, Incentive, a bunch of different folks that have gone on to do some amazing things. And I immediately went out and had to learn more. I actually joined a bunch of crowds. I started trying to understand, why does this work? What's going on here? And about that same time, about 2010, a guy named Jeff Davis and Jason Cruzan at NASA started benchmarking some of the companies that were using these new methods. And then they actually ran some pilots at NASA and found that these actually were really effective tools, that it wasn't just hype. And about that time, the government, which is not known for actually its innovative and keeping up with innovation, did something kind of surprising. The Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House actually looked around and said, you know what, we actually need to get the government doing this. And this is before it's gone mainstream. And so they looked around the agencies and found that NASA actually had run some pilots and knew a little bit about this and said, would you stand up a center of excellence and not only try to help NASA adopt these new methods, but actually help the rest of the federal government. And so that's what we do. We are the Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovations, like the worst title ever. It's like this long and you can't say it. But our job is to educate the government workforce, and especially within NASA, to start using these tools and start using crowdsourcing and crowdsourcing challenges. And we do that across all 10 centers. We have about 60,000 employees when you count all of our contractors within the agency. We do that under the moniker of the NASA Tournament Lab. That's our brand name. And then we've worked now directly with about 12 different agencies. We've consulted with at least that many other agencies on how this stuff works. And the way we're set up with our NASA Tournament Lab is that we provide basically support for these different projects, finding ways for them to actually do this work. And we do that through, first, our internal crowd. So we have about 20,000 of our employees on a crowd called NASA at Work. And then we focus on what we call curated crowds. So like Topcoder, where there's a community of users that are focused on doing certain tasks in certain domains. And we have about, I don't think I have them listed all here, we have about 16 crowds that we use. And we're really a brokering. We're brokering between those projects, finding work for us to do challenges, and then we find the right platform to go use that uses these crowdsourcing methods. And what we're really doing is we're engaging the public as a partner in actually doing the work of space exploration. Now, we have the NASA brand, which is really handy and kind of pulling people in, but all of these platforms are public, which means anyone can join for free. And so we can actually do worldwide challenges and invite everyone to come and help us, and they just have to funnel through these platforms like Topcoder. We also are part of a larger set of crowd-based work at NASA. So we have our larger, what we call Centennial Challenges. Those are multi-years, kind of like X Prize challenges. We also have a bunch of citizen science work going on. If you haven't seen what's going on in citizen science, it is amazing. And then we have various things in education and in several other areas that extend. We have like one of the largest hackathons in the world is the International Space Apps Challenge that NASA runs. So we actually have a fairly wide portfolio of crowd-based activities. And then from the start, we've actually been partnered with Harvard Business School. So Kareem Lakhani there is one of the world leaders in studying crowdsourcing. They've done a ton with Topcoder, and we partner with them really to understand how this works and to make it work better. These curated crowds, there we go. These curated crowds are really the backbone of our work, right? And so you're all familiar with the 1.4 million software developers at Topcoder, but we also have contracts with Kaggle, Common Pool, Luminary Labs, HeroX, Innocentive, Nine Sigma, Amazon Mechanical Turk, we just started working with, Tongle, Filmmakers, Freelancer, which is 31 million freelancers, GrabCAD, C-Outsource. These are all different companies that we're trying to figure out how can we actually get our work out to this crowd, because we're seeing just amazing things. And I will say we've been doing this for, since our COSI was stood up in 2011, so 8 years. And we are still experimenting. We are still finding things that are really kind of blowing our socks off and making us want to learn more. So we've done about 300 challenges. We've included our internal and external challenges. We gather a whole lot of data around those. We have about a 90% success rate, 92, 93%. And that is actually just measured by asking the client, did you advance this? Did you solve this? Did you incrementally advance? Did you fully advance your solution? And then of those, we look at how much would this have cost you to do it with traditional ways. And 80% of the time, we're getting the feedback that this is cheaper. And in fact, not a little cheaper. The average cost savings is 40% over traditional methods. And so we're really excited about what's going on there. We're getting some good tipping points. I thought what I'd do today is show a few examples of what we've done specifically through Topcoder, since that's where we are, but I will talk a little bit about some of our other challenges. I think this is a great picture that got shown earlier. Our ISS Astronaut Food Intake Tracker iPad app was really a nice effort that showed what the crowd could do, and it really surprised people. The comment for the astronauts when they saw this was not developed at NASA. Right? Because it didn't have that same look. It had a very polished commercial look to it, as if it was something that would actually get out in the public at a higher quality. And it's really interesting. This is an infographic Topcoder did, so stealing your own stuff for your pitch, I think you're okay with that. But the way that they atomize the challenges is just fascinating. If you're not familiar with it, it's not one big contest. It is a bunch of contests. In fact, there were 21 challenges or contests just in this one challenge. We ended up with 99 submissions, 55 different people submitting on those, 20 different winners. And we did this entire app for less than $100,000, which was really, for us, a big cost savings. That is actually an application that's currently flying on Space Station right now, and the crew is using it, which, if you know anything about what it takes to certify software for flight, you know that means something, because we had to convince our security people that bad people hadn't put code in here that was going to destroy the space station. That's a conversation that takes a long time. And it just was a way to kind of showcase the creativity that we could get from a crowd. One of the early challenges we did was really an analytical challenge, the modeling challenge called the Longeron Marathon Challenge. On the space station, we have these big solar arrays, right? They're as big as a football field. And if you get shadowing in space, right, and you get part of the truss in sunlight and part of the truss in shade, if you know anything about space, you know that all heat transfer is radiative, right? So you've got this really hot side that's facing the sun, and then you've got this other side that gets shadowed. And if you get that in the wrong places, you can actually twist the array, right? You have the normal things that happen in materials. And so we actually have a routine that we run to actually analyze the shadowing to make sure that when we get that phenomena that we deal with it. And so that's why you'll see sometimes there's some odd angles in some of the solar arrays. So we actually ran this as a top coder challenge, which I think for a lot of our folks was like, this was really complicated modeling stuff that there's no way anybody but NASA. We have some egos at NASA, as you might imagine, for good reason, because we hire some amazing people. But we handed this to the crowd in top coder and got an entire system that was significantly cheaper than what we had built, the original system that Boeing had built. And it worked better than the original system, better on the edge cases, and really showed people that we could do something of substance, of technical difficulty. Asteroid Data Hunter, this was us trying to actually find asteroids. There's some nice quotes in here that say that that's important for all life. I think you would agree. And in this, we actually had the baseline algorithm for finding asteroids, which are really dark. They're not like stars. They don't give off light. You've got to find them, right, with radar and with light bouncing off at very particular times. And so they're very difficult to find. And so we ended up on this particular algorithm being able to not only improve the algorithm for finding asteroids by 15%, but this included building up a multi-platform downloadable app that amateur astronomers could then use with their own telescopes to try to find and characterize asteroids. So we actually ended up employing people looking at all parts of the globe outward at the sky trying to find asteroids. So it increased it not just by the percentage of detection rate of the algorithm, but then the application, which, right, you can't actually be pointing telescopes everywhere. And that was all for, I think, about $120,000. Along with the asteroid, we had a whole asteroids campaign, as you might imagine. We have a large array that's being built of like 50 dishes that we want to be able to track asteroids. And so we actually put an algorithm challenge together to say, okay, you've got 50 dishes. They're arrayed, so you can actually use them all to point at one thing, or you can use 5 to point at something else. And now you've got the night sky that has 8 or 10 objects going across the sky at any one time, and they're coming into and out of view. How do we maximize the science so that we're actually tracking all of these to the best and most efficient way to get the most science? And so you're subarraying 5 here to track for 5 minutes and then swapping over. The fascinating thing about this, we put this on top coder, and we ended up with a co-pilot, which I think you all know are the crowd project managers. And the co-pilot actually did almost the entire model of this like over a weekend. And he set up for a good challenge, and we ended up with this really great result. But it was almost trivial. It was something that we hadn't even had our folks looking at yet. And he did it almost trivially. Unfortunately, he actually left about 2 weeks before we ended the entire project because he got a job offer from Google. So the caliber of people we were tapping into was really impressive. We've done a couple of Robonaut vision algorithm challenges. If you're not familiar, Robonaut is our kind of humanoid-looking robot that we have on space station. It's actually right now it's down for repair. But it is really looking at how do we use robotics on board. And what we've done is actually use top coder challenges to start to get better vision algorithms so we can recognize tools, find them, pick them up, do work with them. And really, that team is just coming back to us over and over. They've got another couple challenges planned, Andy. So as soon as I can get them, as soon as they fix their current robot, they're going to come back. We've done, I think, 12 different challenges with the disruption tolerant networking team. I kind of skipped one there. One of those challenges, if you're not familiar, space, once you get outside of low Earth orbit, time delays in communications gets to be significant. You can't use regular network protocols. And so by the time you get to Mars, it's like a 20-minute one-way delay all the way to Mars. And so we have a protocol we're building called disruption-tolerant networking. It's fairly complex. It has lots of protocol specs associated with it. We uploaded all of those to Topcoder and had them do a series of challenges to build a protocol. One was this astronaut email. But one of the problems they had was security. How, once you get out of low Earth orbit, once you have this delay, because you have the delay, but you also aren't able to communicate directly with the spacecraft all the time, right? You don't always have a straight path. And in that case, how do you do security? How do you do security key exchanges? Security becomes a big thing with us these days because there's a lot of people that would love to hack into a NASA spacecraft. And it was a big deal, and we went out and asked a whole bunch of folks that were working this kind of communications work to say, how do you do secure key exchanges in this kind of world? And we got over and over, it is impossible. I think somebody even came out and said, it is mathematically impossible to do this. We posted that on Topcoder, and it ended up, we found the solution, which was the Byzantine generals problem, if you're familiar with that kind of nerdiness. And the fascinating thing about the Byzantine generals problem is we had already used the Byzantine generals problem to code up our synchronous computing that we'd used on X-38 and is now being used in Sierra Nevada and other places within NASA. And so it was really fascinating that we had to go outside to Topcoder for people to tell us that the solution to our impossible problem was something we already had, right? But that's the way that works. Just to go on a few others, we partnered with a company that had a new sensor for how to actually measure earthquakes, and it was really interesting. The USGS actually was anti us doing this because it went against their common way of doing things, but really proved out that we could actually do some stuff with some new sensor technology that hopefully will end up saving some lives soon. I want to talk a little about some of the other agencies over time, because I think it's fascinating what some of the other agencies have brought in terms of problems and what we've been able to do on the platform. One was USAID, who actually was able to bring in State Department data about countries and say, look, genocide is happening all over the world. How can we stop that? And so we ran an algorithm challenge to see maybe we can predict when that's going to happen. And sure enough, the resulting algorithm can actually take in data about how many problems they're having within the country, what kind of government they've got, what the incident rates are, and be able to say, you know what, this country is starting to go into the red zone. They actually have a high probability of starting to commit genocide. Who would have thought you could use data science for that kind of thing? Other than you data scientists that are out there. EPA, the cyanobacteria project was really interesting. It's where the green gunk kind of clogs up all the filters, if you remember that, and I think it was Detroit not too long ago. And they had where they wanted a mobile app to be able to track that, as well as an algorithm to predict. We brought that in, came up with a really outstanding app that they have now deployed out and is in wide use around the country. Illegal fishing, there was a really nice contest we did there around trying to detect that from satellite imagery. Notice we got over 95% accuracy in correctly identifying the type of fishing that's being done, whether it's the right kind or the illegal kind. And no one had even come close to that. I'm really proud of the work that's been done with the VA. And if you don't know, Topcoder's even taken the work with the VA and turned it into an entire work model, which I'll let them talk about. But this was the Kidney App Challenge, which was really just a nutrition app aimed at people with diabetes, right? A big problem within the VA and diabetes. Well, the fascinating thing about this too is Topcoder actually partnered with HeroX on this. And HeroX actually did the ideation challenge and then handed off the best ideas that then Topcoder went and coded. And we've been stringing folks together like that really effectively, or they've been stringing together. We have 3 current challenges going. Realm, which is our RFID challenge, trying to detect and track items. We have something like hundreds of thousands of objects around the space station. We have about, I think, 3,000 to 6,000 lost items. As you can imagine, you've got this big facility in space where people are rotating out every few months, and nobody tells you where they left the wrench, right? And so then the wrench, you also have the problem that it floats off somewhere else, right? There's a really exciting work that NIST is doing on differential privacy, and then SOCOM's got some stuff going on geolocation algorithms with high-frequency radio waves. So some interesting stuff going on all around the agency. I just wanted to flash this up. This gives you a sense of the kinds of challenges that we've been doing and the diversity of platforms that we've been using. There's really a lot of interesting work that is going on in every area. I'm running out of time a little bit. I want to pivot just a minute to where we see all this going. I've been able to go to several Harvard meetings and some other meetings, and the conversations about curated communities have really pivoted from crowdsourcing and challenges being great, and they still are, to wait a minute, the entire workforce is becoming a crowd. And what does that mean? And Wayne Gretzky, just to keep on the sports theme of sports quotes, skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been. And we're starting to see this, and so we're starting to try to figure out, what do we need to do to actually pivot and start to use this? How does NASA go from 17,000 civil servants and 43,000 contractors that are kind of in situ to something more like 5,000 to 10,000 civil servants and maybe 1 million freelancers, right? And what does that start to look like? There's several really great reports out there, but it is this kind of aggregation of both the labor pool market, the gig economy, and this challenge work that's going on in different crowds. If you haven't seen some of those reports, it's been mentioned here today, that workforce is growing at like 3 times the workforce rate of everyone else. So people working for companies are changing, and it's projected, if this continues, that by 2027, there will be more gig workers and more people in full-time freelance than there are people in companies. And if you think about it, that means your company's got to change. Talked just 2 days ago with Paul Estes at Microsoft, who is actually leading up this effort at Microsoft. He's in charge of the 360 project. And he's taken everything in his life and freelanced it personally. And then he turned around to his team of about 40 and said, okay, about a year ago, we're getting rid of all of our service contracts. And here's an Upwork enterprise license. Go do all your work using freelancers. And he has seen some amazing results already. And what's really interesting is the people he has on his team that were low performers are now high performers, because they're suddenly learning how to actually create a team to do what they were doing by themselves. They're learning we're starting to talk about it as superpowers, right? How can you as an employee do so much more? And they're starting to see that. In fact, this idea of crowds of practice, communities of practice, is really kind of gaining force. And I think Topcoder is a great example of this, right? Where software, data science is aggregated. Nerds come here to find people that they can talk to, that know what they're doing. They come here to learn. They come here to actually do their passion. And you're seeing this over and over in GrabCAD for mechanical engineers. You're seeing this in Tongle for filmmakers. And they are building their skills. If you look at what Paro is doing, which is a crowd freelancers for finance and accounting, they are doing some amazing stuff of upskilling as they're going. And the beauty here is there's a possibility where you can actually have organizations that are high performing within an organization and freelancers that are getting to do their passion rather than having to go to staff meeting and deal with overhead of bosses. This democratization work is really exciting, and we're trying to figure out where it's going. If you look at what it could be, on demand and persistent. In other words, you can get somebody for a week, but you can also get somebody who you have a relationship with and use them a lot, both globally and local, right? Uber's a great example of that. They're a global crowd, but you can actually get somebody to show up in front of the hotel, which I will do at 4 o'clock. Grunt workers, all the way up to experienced experts, right? You can get people to just churn on data that requires no skill, but we did a challenge not too long ago where the top finalists were all nuclear physicists from around the world that had given us, just for the chance of $20,000, papers that had taken at least 100 labor hours to go do, right? Lifelong learners. We live in a world where the rate of change is so fast. In fact, somebody made the quote the other day that when it comes to companies, if your company can't change as fast as the rate of change of technology, your expiration date is almost up, right? In fact, there's some really interesting, if you're not pivoting to this new stuff, you got to ask yourself, how long will I last, right? In 1958, 61 years was the longevity of a company, the average longevity of a company. In 2017, that's 18 years. Over the last 15 years, if you look at all the list of the Fortune 500 companies, almost half no longer exist. We live in a world of change, and how do we get to that? We're eventually going to get lower and lower friction to these platforms of matching skill to need, and that has a whole bunch of things that have really already been talked. I'll just get off with this, is we talk about open innovation as this key thing that we've tapped into. And when we first started, it was this thing to help us. But I'm seeing now, I for sure know open is the future, but I don't think innovation is optional anymore. I think it's got to happen. The capabilities of these crowds is growing really rapidly. The curated communities are attracting passion and building expertise and skills. And it's just really effective to actually finding those innovations, especially when you start talking about innovation and diversity and how diverse crowds can bring you just amazing results. And then those that fail to innovate really will be left behind. And my timer went off. Look at that. It's perfect timing. So that's my get off the stage chart. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yep, I think there's a microphone coming to you shortly, or a short microphone coming. I don't see anyone scrambling with a microphone, so go ahead.
Congratulations. Now, you have done so much in an agency where one person really made it. Can you share some of your experience with when we start this kind of collaboration?
Sure.
Where to go, where to start, and what are your experiences?
Sure. So what are our experiences and how did we start this? I would say, first off, there's a great failure case at the Harvard Business School called Houston, We Have a Problem, that talks about how this was rejected by NASA in the first couple of years. So just know it was not smooth, right? Jeff Davis brought it into his organization in the Health and Human Performance Directorate and said, we will use this. And his mid-managers basically said, no, we're not. We had good data, we had good reasons, but we really found that cultural barrier there. One of the things that's worked really well is our office is basically what we call, where's Diane, are you here? What Diane calls Sherpas, right? So we're there to help people. We're not just brokers where we say, hey, just talk to this person. We actually put all of the contracts in place, because at NASA, it takes 9 months to get a contract in place. And who's gonna go try to do 9 months of work that's not your core work just to try out a crowd? Nobody. And so that was the first big barrier, which meant we had to work with legal, we had to work with procurement, we had to work with all these folks to try to find a way to do that in an effective way. So having somebody, a small group, doesn't have to be large, that basically helps the customer, in this case, is our projects, it's our engineers, to say, look, you will win if you go this direction, sell it to them, educate them, but then also handle the process through so that because it's new. Nobody likes to do new stuff. Nobody. You don't like to do new stuff, right? And you just have to use it once or twice. I remember the first time I used Uber was actually at a TCO conference like 4 years ago, and it was Ashley who magically like did something on her phone, and there was this SUV that shows up 2 minutes later, and we were all like, what just happened? But and now I use it all the time, right? Somebody's got to show you, they've got to help you. through that, and that just goes all the way through. So we are still starting. Like this is not in use in 99% of NASA, but it is gaining. It is a snowball effect. The more people hear about the successes, the more we share, the more they're like, we want to do that. We're about to try to start a pilot where we actually have a couple of software developers that are crowdsourcing everything, much like we've heard other folks do. So we're all kind of heading that same direction. Anything else? Yeah. Now there's a magic microphone.
We do. Steve, it's always a pleasure to hear you talk. I'm pretty familiar with the case studies, have worked together on some of the projects. I want to kind of, ping your brain about, the future.
Yep.
Crowdsourcing has been once described as a poor man's AI. I think Diamandis has said that. Dave Messenger showed us, some great synergies between AI and crowdsourcing. What are your thoughts on AI and crowdsourcing?
Yeah, I mean, AI is coming and it's coming fast. I think for a lot of companies, crowdsourcing is probably the way you can access the expertise out there that will know how to use all the little AI tools, right? So it's the first stop, I would think, in trying to actually access what's coming is using the crowd. Some of the most exciting stuff in AI, everyone knows AI is not coming in a HAL format, right? Even though we have Alexa and we have other things that kind of make it seem like we have that. It's coming in lots of little places where machine learning has been applied to a very specific area and people have built up a tool and a capability that can be applied. And so I really think the first step is accessing the crowds. But some of the more exciting stuff is actually the symbiotic stuff that's going on, where crowds are used for a portion that then work off AI. There's a company called Unanimous AI that we just talked to who's got some whole work in this area. And I think lots of folks are doing that kind of thing very successfully. And so when people talk about pivoting to AI, on the workforce standpoint, I would say everyone should be afraid of automation taking your job. It's not just going to take blue collar jobs. It's going to take everybody's jobs. And one of the things I see about crowds and freelance workforce is if there's hope in the labor market, it's in this model, because this model is full of lifelong learners that can pivot quickly and can scale their time. And that is actually where I think the future of work, one of the reasons it's going to go that way is it's the real hope. But that's just me talking, so. Which I know you wanted to hear. Anybody else? Thank you so much. And lunch.
Yeah, that's the point. Great job.
Now it's lunch.
That's good. Oh, audio. Hello. All right. Thank you, Steve. This is the good part. So if I could get everyone to have a seat. If you're standing, if you could just have a seat. This is the awkward part. People in the back of the room are like, what's going on? Have a seat. If you're standing up, take a seat. And the reason is it's time for lunch to be served. So it's a plated lunch. We need everyone to just stay in their seat so we can get all of your food out to you. We will be back in about 20 minutes, but lunch is served. Thanks. right. I hope lunch was great. If you have not finished, as my good colleague Clinton has not, he's enjoying that salmon and steak. But keep eating, keep enjoying lunch. We're going to go to our next presentation, and then we have the closing panel after that. I don't have a clicker on me, and that's probably my fault. But coming up next, you're going to hear a very personal and inspiring story from the Senior Vice President of Alliances at Spigot, who is also one of our newly found alliance partners at Topcoder. Please help me and welcome them to the stage, Kenneth Mayer.
Still gonna need a clicker. I don't think my mic is on. Oh,
See how that works?
okay, and that's forward. I don't know. I was actually hoping they were going to play the theme from Rocky. That would have really inspired me. A very good afternoon to everyone. As I said, or as Aaron said, my name's Ken Mayer with Spigot. You know, over the last few days, I've spent a great deal of time thinking what would engage the audience, what would motivate this audience, and maybe, just maybe, what might inspire you. And then after seeing some of these presentations this morning, I realized that's going to be a little bit more difficult. I was all set to go. I had everything prepared, and as I'm driving over here, I remember what somebody once told me. They said, from the moment you're born till the moment you die, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, your brain never stops working. And the only time it takes a vacation is when you have to do a presentation like this. So, today's topic is about breakthrough ideas and how they may or do lead to life-changing outcomes. I'm going to ask the audience, this is part one of the engagement. Does anybody recognize this picture? Who this person is? Anyone in the audience? Well, what I will tell you, this man is named Dr. Jim Allison. He's the doctor at MD Anderson that discovered and has pioneered a cancer treatment called checkpoint inhibitors. To add credibility to this, 5 weeks ago on Monday, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Medicine. Very interesting. I'm not sure how I start the video.
And then he's going to have a passion of understanding how things work. I've been fascinated by T cells ever since they were discovered, which was actually when I was in college. Rather than just trying to say, okay, let's just get T cells attack cancer, I thought that we could do a better job of it. We knew really in detail how they work. It was not a simple process, it's just flipping a switch. It typically plays a very large role in finding new things. We questioned what the paradigm was because there were other people working on the same molecule and said it was a positive molecule. You know, I just didn't necessarily believe that. I think what happens is that tumors, if they're big and they've been there for a while, T cells, once they get activated, they may turn themselves off before they can kill the tumor cells. And so that's kind of the moment that this is the off switch. We just disable it temporarily so they can kill the tumor cells. That was the sort of aha moment when I thought about it, but you know, I had a lot of thoughts that were wrong. The time I really done it right was after hearing reports of people's tumors just vanishing. That's what I want to tell them about
it. And he won the Nobel Prize for Medicine. So, whoops, I got to go back one. I'm going to start my personal innovation journey with a very simple statement. And I find strength in being able to share this with you. I would not be here today if it weren't for Dr. Jim Allison. And what I'm about to share with you is my journey, which will conclude with an understanding, and I'll say this in advance and when we do it. Nobody knows as much as everybody. So my personal innovation journey, this is the first time I'm sharing this in public, so if I become emotional, bear with me. In 2015, I discovered some lumps. No big deal, went to the doctor. He said, oh, it looks like an intestinal inflammation. Take some antibiotics and call me in a month. Well, the lumps didn't go away, and it turns out I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And in fact, the doctors in Detroit at the hospital said that I had had cancer for at least 2 or 3 years because they found a tumor in my abdomen. I thought I was getting fat. They found a tumor in my abdomen the size of a football. So I immediately began doing chemotherapy. I went through 18 weeks of harsh chemo, managed through it, didn't miss a day of work, kept doing everything, and was pleasantly surprised. Achieved complete remission, 100%. Fast forward 9 months, and the cancer came back. Fortunately, it was isolated, and they said, well, we'll let you try radiation. Did radiation for 22 weeks. Went into complete remission, no problems. July 18th, 2017, which happens to be my birthday, I was actually with our CEO at my doctor for a checkup, and they said not only had the cancer come back, it was all over my body. The only treatment they suggested was what's called stem cell transplant, which is an extremely harsh, very debilitating procedure. Fortunately, my wife and I made a decision. We went down to MD Anderson in Houston to get a second opinion. They also said your only pathway is stem cell transplant, but maybe you'll qualify for a clinical trial of what's called CAR-T immunotherapy. So fast forward, we were nervous, we were scared. We read about it, people had died from it, people went into comas, people lost all their cognitive capacity, which if you can't tell, I've already lost some. And in January, we went back for another checkup. They informed us that you qualify right now for the clinical trial of CAR-T. They told me in January of 2018, barely 9 months ago, I had 6 weeks to live. I had over 100 tumors in my body. They extracted my white blood cells. In January, they were sent off to a pharmaceutical company called Kite Pharmaceutical, where they re-engineered my own white blood cells by adding chimeric antigen receptors. I had to stay in the hospital for about a month, some pretty harsh side effects. But we returned from Houston on Tuesday of this week for my 9-month checkup. I'm in 100% remission and no signs of any cancer now for 9 months. Thank you very much. But the essence of this story, and as I said a moment ago, if Jim Allison hadn't discovered this, I wouldn't be here. And the brilliance in his discovery was that he and his team, while the rest of the world was all saying what needs to be added to a T cell, your white blood cell, to get it to recognize, attach, and kill cancer, he and his team went the opposite way. They said it isn't about what you need to add or turn on, non-positive. What he said was maybe there's something going on where you need to turn it off. And that's how the pathway for immunotherapy was created. How brilliant is that? So all this took place at MD Anderson. I go back to the statement that I just made, and it's so relative, especially to some of the presentations this morning. We've always thought at Spigot that nobody knows as much as everybody. And this story, my personal innovation journey, absolutely confirms that. So we want to elaborate on that a little. The first thing I'm going to tell you, and we are a software provider. There is no platform, there is no technology, there is no coding that can do a better job or is the solution, in our opinion. We believe the crowd is the solution. And we believe that if you subscribe to the crowd being the solution, that cognitive diversity matters. According to Dr. Scott Page, who wrote a book called The Difference, he says that cognitive diversity consistently trumps heterogeneity. And in our own experience at Spigot, we have data scientists, and what they've concluded is if we take a group of non-experts and we ask them a question, more often than not, we're going to get a reasonably good outcome. If we ask that same question to a group of experts, more often than not, we're going to get a reasonably better outcome. But it isn't until we combine those two groups together that we achieve the optimal outcome. So when we think about crowdsourcing, collaborative innovation, and to Steve Rader's point, crowd curation, think about cognitive diversity. I would also tell you that we believe scale matters. It's not just the scope of the audience you reach out to, but the frequency in which you engage them. That really matters in your crowdsourcing initiatives. So moving on, we're now going to talk a few minutes about crowdsourcing innovation. Different terms: collaborative innovation, crowdsourcing, co-creation, open innovation. And what I'm going to tell you is there has been an evolution. Part of this is opinion, part of it is experience, and frankly, part of it may have been what I heard this morning. I'm sitting here scribbling notes furiously. But we believe that the crowdsourcing approach is evolving, and it's gone from your conventional closed or internal innovation. Everybody hears about open innovation, and again, to Steve's point from Nassau, crowd curation, crowds by design, what we call smart crowds as a service. How cool is it when you're able to begin assembling, disassembling, and reassembling unique crowds based on the problems you're trying to solve? Examples of this exist everywhere. Our partnership with Topcoder is Spigot's first milestone in bringing a smart crowd. We're changing the way this works, where Spigot is all about let's make sure we do the right thing, right? Because we all know anybody can do the wrong thing really well. Let's do the right thing, and with Topcoder, let's do it right. So the idea that we can curate crowds and build our own networks. So this was a tough slide to add, because I'm not supposed to tell you about the difficulties and the challenges. However, they are worthwhile. The first thing I would tell you is crowdsourcing means different things to different people. The good news is you run a challenge, an ideation challenge, and you get 2,500, 3,000, 5,000 votes. The bad news is you got 4,000 ideas you have to go through. What we've learned is in crowdsourcing innovation, there's a notion of idea fatigue. There is a disproportionate ratio for most companies of eyeballs to ideas. And we believe what happens is called the Google effect. For most of us, including me, when I go to Google, I do a search, I look at the top 2, 3 results, and then I move on, right? There's an old joke, if you want something to die, put it on page 2 of Google. So in an innovation, ideation, crowdsourcing challenge where you're using the crowd, remember, the crowd is the solution. People get idea fatigue. They look at the top 2, 3, 4 winning ideas and they move on. What if the best idea didn't come in for 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later? The other issue is herd behavior. If anybody had to drive here this morning to be here, herd behavior is everywhere on highways. What is it about people who have to herd together in clumps of cars? And we see it in innovation, crowdsourcing challenges. People will vote for their boss's idea. People will vote and comment, engage on their friends' ideas. You have to eliminate that crowd bias and behavior. And then the third piece is this notion of the idea contest, right? In as of itself, in a contest implies that there are winners and that there are losers. And while we believe that competition can be very healthy, we also very much believe that collaboration, getting people to form teams around ideas, ultimately gets to a better outcome faster. And of course, we see emergent behavior. I would behave very differently as part of a team than I might as an individual. So we believe that collaboration, in fact, in that book, The Difference by Dr. Scott Page, he talks about impact associated with conjunctive behavior, meaning people forming a team in order to achieve something, versus disjunctive behavior, first place, second place, third place. So moving on, you have to have this slide in every deck, right? You have to say, we're Spigot and here's who we are. We do power the innovation programs for a lot of the leading companies across almost every major industry. We're huge in oil and gas. We're big in financial services. So we've learned a lot of lessons. And what I would tell you is our partnership with Wipro changes everything. As I said earlier, it's the first milestone for us in our journey to offer smart crowds as a service. You know what metaphor makes the most sense to me? Anyone remember when the iPod came out in 2003, 2004? Of course, there were 30 or 40 other portable music devices in the market. And I love asking people, what was it about the iPod that ultimately became that category killer? You could always say, yes, it was the UI, it was the design. I really want to believe that they were the first platform to combine the technology with the consumable asset, right? iTunes. That's all we've done with Topcoder. We've taken that whole fuzzy front end of the innovation ideation process and attached it to the consumable asset that now can deliver and fulfill on it. To me, this is a very potent step. So what is this about? Using the Spigot platform, very simple, very engaging, crowd science, behavioral mechanics in order to avoid idea fatigue, crowd bias, herding behavior. But it's a very simple flow. Ideas are discovered, refined, defined, and selected in Spigot. Through the API, they're integrated and passed directly into Topcoder, and the fulfillment process begins. Apps design, prototypes, MVPs. It's that simple. The good news is something that simple can have remarkably profound impact. From our perspective, we really see that the foundation is we're for the first time inverting that supply and demand model. No longer do great ideas around digital transformation have to wait for 3 months while somebody gets back to them or the backlog of projects gets finished. Or, yeah, I know that's what I told you, but that's not what I wanted. And so we're overcoming that innovation or that delivery, transformation, execution, and we're doing it in half the time for half the price. So I'd love to say that I have a lot more. I'm just going to end there and see if there's any comments, questions, or observations. Bueller? Anybody? One over there. Thank you. I'll owe you some money.
So I'm just basically asking the question from the idea fatigue thing.
Mm-hmm.
So is that you get the fulfillment and the work done on Topcoder and then you parse the ideas, the winning ideas? Is that what you do? Or how does that get done? I wasn't
So, yeah, let me go back to that slide if I may, if I'm capable. So great question. So the question is, does the idea fatigue happen before it goes to top coder? Correct me if I'm wrong, or after it goes to top coder? Is that your question? Okay, so I'll try my best to address it. The idea fatigue that I spoke about is when you're doing a broad-based innovation idea challenge, whether it's open, curated crowds, or just internally. The good news is if you do it well, you're going to get a lot of participation, which means you're going to get a lot of ideas. Nobody, and I doubt anyone in this room, wants to sit down and go through a list of 300, 400, 500 ideas. Idea fatigue simply implies that there has to be a better way of getting to finding those right ideas, identifying and ensuring that ideas don't get overlooked. And we call this crowd science, behavioral mechanics. We have to get past that idea fatigue to get to the best idea in order then to move it into top coder. Did that answer your question? Perfect. Please, somebody give me another question. I won't feel important unless you do. Okay. Thank you all so much for allowing us to be here, and thank you so much to Top Coder for doing such a phenomenal job. Thanks, y'all.
You're good, man. Thank you, Ken. Thanks, Ken. Very inspiring story. I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, wow, there's no way we couldn't have you here to speak. So we're at the last talk session panel of the day. And the panel will be led by a true top coder champion. Vasudha has been a inspiration to us and really ensuring that, you know, the top coder mantra and brand is being pushed throughout Wipro. And she did that in full display yesterday. So if you were at our VIP reception last night and you heard Vasudha speaking, she gave the best pitch that I've heard in a long time in 3 quick bullet points. So Vasudha is going to be the moderator of our panel, and she'll call each panelist up and introduce them. But please help me welcome to the stage the regional business head for Wipro Limited, Vasudha Raman.
Need that? Okay. I see. Okay. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Okay, I know I got the last session. Come on, let's try that again. Hello, everybody. Okay. So since Dallas didn't quite live up to the expectations of keeping it warm, I decided to get the panel a little nice and toasty here so that you don't be very disappointed. And we're going to try and keep it very interactive. So we're going to be running a poll in between through digital participation. Hopefully, Jenny, you can get that up and running in the meantime. We're going to be running it through Kahoot. So you may want to keep your mobile phones handy if you are able to get it up and running, of course. So let me talk a little bit about what we're going to speak with the panel about. Almost each of us have started a journey, and everyone would have heard disrupt or get disrupted. Either you do it or somebody else is going to do it for you. And each of us, in the mad rush to kind of stay ahead, stay relevant, or be better than their peers, have started this journey and are at different levels of maturity and progress. So what we're going to talk a little bit today about is demystifying the trends that we are seeing, and more importantly, what are the challenges? What are the pitfalls? Is there something really like digital transformation? And see what our panelists have to say. So with that, let me welcome my very first panelist on board. She is the co-founder of GE Genius Link, as well as GE Fuse, Director of Open Innovation and Advanced Manufacturing. Long-timer at GE, please put your hands together as I welcome on stage Diane Finkhauser. Thank you. So we're actually twinning today. I just removed my arm sling, which I had all along, and I see that you have one on your foot.
Yeah, we could have
Yeah.
been matching. Yeah,
I know. Right. I
Weaponized
wish I
footwear.
knew. I would have put that on.
yeah.
But
Stairs are tricky.
I know. I'm glad you got on well. All right. My next panelist is an expert in ITSM and ITIL processes and is continuously working towards seeing how does IT add value to business. She runs the global help desk services for one of the largest companies so that you can just do it. Please welcome on board Sharon Ashford from Nike.
Oh, yeah, rematch.
Oh, see, you got something going. Anyway, wherever you'd be comfortable. Glad we got that color matched up. I was just wondering.
I got the memo.
I know. All right. My next panelist on board believes that his leadership strengths lie in being an activator, woo, strategic individualization, learner, VP of Alliances at GitLab. Please put your hands together to welcome on stage Brandon Jung.
Thank you so much.
Very well. So I wanted to ask you, so is woo, what kind of an adjective is that? So you actually use that on LinkedIn to explain your leadership skills, and that's the only reason I got you on the panel, which is a totally different conversation.
Well, there we go. So apparently it was a good thing I did put it on LinkedIn. So woo is a notion of how well you connect with others, right? So the notion is you enjoy connecting with others and you help moving them forward. And it's defined in leadership strengths. So this kind of is pulled from the book called Leadership Strengths, if you haven't read it. Just helps you understand what your strengths are, somewhat your weaknesses, but it lets you operate in a space that you're most effective.
Fantastic. So let's woo the audience today and
We'll
get
see.
them
We'll
on.
have to check if
All
it really
right.
goes through.
All
Or
right.
LinkedIn is correct.
All right. And last but not the least, please put your hands together to welcome on stage the CEO of TopCoder, Mike Morris.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to first start off with you, Diane. I know crowd first, cloud first, and artificial intelligence. This is the future of work in your own mantra, in your own language. So talk to us a little bit about the philosophy and how your customers are seeing the digital trends and evolving through this philosophy of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're in good company here in our belief that the cloud, and AI are really contributing to greater speed, greater agility, and greater access to resources. We at GE, the Genius Link team, is really trying to build an operating system, an expert operating system that is fundamentally focused on the crowd, the cloud, and AI to drive better business performance, really creating a new division of labor and intelligent automation so that our teams, our customers can operate with better information, better resources, better options at a better pace. Just as simple as that. The technology, the resources are available, and we're just trying to operationalize that in a way that's more easily accessible, scalable, and compliant.
Great. Thank you for that. So, you talked about, the need for speed and the need for agility, which is so very important through digital transformations. I somehow feel that innovation is like driving in India. So it's not like driving in the US where you go from gear 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're cruising. It's like you're in gear 1 and then you go 2 and then you have to go in 4 for 5 minutes and then come back in 3 and 2. So let me talk to you a little bit about how are you all doing the continuous integration and development to accelerate these cycles to speeden up or to slow down and enabling customers through that entire journey.
Sure. Much like everyone's kind of chatted today, we've talked about people, process, technology. Obviously, GitLab sort of lands in the technology space. Of those, you have to have the people, crowdsourcing. You have to have the process. That means you have to develop that internally to use them. So otherwise, and then we focus on kind of that third leg of the stool, which is really technology. GitLab, for context-wise, it's probably not surprising to anyone that we do Git work. We're the largest, we have the largest number of private Git repositories in the world, about 200,000 companies.
And you were recently rated #1 by Forrester.
We did, so we've moved, I think we're a little, everyone makes a choice. We all make choices and then it's hard to adjust them later. GitLab's nice because you know that it's Git. What you don't know about it is it also is a full CI/CD pipeline. It's got monitoring involved. It's a full end-to-end DevOps tool. And that's something we've seen a lot of our customers came to us and it was a surprise. We had to iterate really fast because we likewise made a choice. We, I guess, made a couple of pivots. We initially said, well, you know, the future is SaaS and a public cloud when we started. And so, you know, hey, we should do Git as a public cloud. GitHub did that really well. So we pivoted and focused on private Git repositories. And that was extremely successful because naturally most people actually, when they develop the code they want to run, they want to keep it in their own Git repository. But then we also pivoted because the question about continuous integration. We thought the same thing, and I think everyone's heard the term, hey, have a whole bunch of tools and have them really sharp, small tools, and then you integrate them together. And we thought the same thing, so we should have a CI platform because that's the next direction you would go. Our customers told us otherwise, and they said, it's nice that you have Git, and it's nice you have a continuous integration platform, but we kind of want them together. And that really began us our journey 3 years ago, putting all of it together to deliver a full solution from beginning to end for a developer so they can come with an IDE, and then you have a platform if you want. You can plug anything else you want, but you're given a platform and kind of takes that tech out of it, lets you focus more on the people in the process, which are actually probably the two hardest pieces. So
Right. And congratulations, you all did not get acquired. So, and good luck.
Yeah, actually, we're enjoying being independent. So
Cool.
Yeah, sometimes it just works well. Your timing is as important as what you're doing. And so luck, I don't think we have any way of solving to that, but GitHub's acquisition was helpful for us, obviously.
So does anybody else have a viewpoint about the GitHub acquisition?
I'd be
Mike?
fascinated if anyone has any.
They did, it was the $200 million in revenue. It was a $7.5 billion acquisition, one of the largest out there in the industry today. And they had interesting press associated with it, definitely. Yeah. So, all right. So let's, over to you, Mike. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different trends that we are hearing about. I mean, there's blockchain, there's IoT, there's AR, there's VR, there's CV. What do you believe is hype and what do you believe is reality? And, what are the trends that you're seeing in terms of the crowdsourcing journey?
I'm going to take the GitHub question, actually.
Okay, I like that.
Took the bait. Thank you.
I did, yeah. I actually feel really passionate about this subject. It was kind of clear to me, and I think it's clear the value of your company as well, is the who owns the hearts and the minds of the developer communities, right? And we always say at TopCoder, we actually are brethren in the fact that we kind of believe in this virtual workforce. And you can live anywhere, you can work where you want to work how you want to work, and choose what you want to work on. And the thing about GitHub and GitLab is I think they truly have gone a little bit beyond that and said, hey, we're going to be the place where they virtually work, right? So it isn't an office, it's the virtual workspace inside of GitLab that people are working and collaborating and getting their to-do lists and marking their work off. And so to me, that's the value of what Microsoft bought. And I think that, personally, they probably were losing a little bit of that hearts and minds of the developer community. In fact, if you look at the recent acquisitions, change always happens around you. And you look back and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And Red Hat for what was it, $34 billion, right?
By IBM, yes.
My humble, biased, top-down-based opinion is, again, that is a hearts and the minds of the developer community, right? What other brand do you have in open source that's as popular, as Red Hat? And maybe Linux, but Red Hat is the popular name for Linux. So to me, that was a big part of that value. I even think the one I can apply this to almost anything. If you want to throw one at me, I'll deflect it. But even Qualtrics, right? Who saw that one coming? It was quoted at $8-9 billion for Qualtrics. And, but that's the ability to get to people, run surveys, expert networks are run on top of Qualtrics. So to me, I think we're seeing this change happen. And we've always believed in it. Like, we've always believed in our core that, we are first a community of developers, designers, and data scientists. That has never changed from day one at Topcoder. That will never change. And we've continued to kind of move ourselves forward. But one example is we now have products that run on top of GitLab, right? So we used to think in a way that let's bring developers in and have them work on our platform, in our workspaces. But we now have said, let them work where they want to work. So there's plugins inside of GitLab that developers can do crowdsourced projects on Topcoder right inside of Git. And that, to me, is one of the trends that we're seeing. Is go where talent wants to be. The other thing that I will say that you heard loud and clear from the very first statement this morning, all the way through to Ken's talk, was this is where the world is going. And I think that people are still not grasping that completely. But, the statistics are that over a third of the employee base today is choosing freelancing as their job of choice. That's what the barriers of, think about it. What am I going to do about health insurance? What am I going to do about my retirement savings, which are actually problems that we will solve in the gig economy. But that's a huge trend. And it's going to continue. It's going to be well beyond 50% in my viewpoint by 2021. Well beyond. And if companies aren't taking notice of that trend, then they're going to be in trouble. So that's, to me, that's the big trend.
Sure,
And that's why we're here, actually.
absolutely. And the other area that analysts are writing a lot about is the AI ops area. They say about 5% of enterprises have either begun that journey or are already on AI ops, and about 40% of enterprises are going to be on AI ops in the next 2 to 3 years. So, while we develop, where everybody designs and develops, Sharon, I'm going to hand this over to you because you run operations day in and day out. So, irrespective of how it gets designed, how it gets developed, it comes back all to running those operations at the back and digitizing those operations. So I know a lot of companies have started the journey of automation, of AI ops. There are companies out there, there are so many tool providers for AI ops. I think MOOCsoft says that they will reduce 90% of the noise associated in your events. I wish my mortgage company could call me and tell me that, hey, I'll take off 90% of your interest and then you can just pay me the rest. But hey, on a more serious note, what is it that y'all are seeing today in terms of a trend? How is Nike approaching this entire transformation on the operations side and integrating AI ops into your overall game plan?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, Nike is no stranger to disruption, no stranger to innovation. However, most of that is externally facing. So our consumer experience, understanding how you exercise, how you work out, how our elite athletes have to push themselves to the next level. And we see that in our manufacturing. We see that in our innovation labs. What I've seen since I've been at Nike, which I can't share with any of you, is amazing. The automation, the AI that goes into understanding that consumer and what needs to drive them, as well as our athletes, is not the same thing that we see in what my colleagues and I refer to as the non-sexy part of Nike, which is operations. So within technology operations, we aim to create an elite experience for our internal employees. We aim for technology to move them, enable them, but not to disrupt them in a bad way or get in their way. And we think that automation and machine learning and AI is on our path to getting there. We don't believe that we can be stuck in the past of where we're doing the traditional, if something breaks, when something breaks, call the service desk, chat with the service desk, or go online to a self-service portal. We've got to be learning what's going on in the environment before it breaks so that we can self-heal it. When it does happen, we have to embed technology support into where our customers live, within the apps, within the experiences they're having, not a separate portal. And then when they're there, we need to collect that information and transition it to a tool that can understand and learn. Where does it go? How do I resolve it automatically? Or how do I escalate it to the group that can do that? Instead of having a person, which is what we have today, reading through that ticket that just came through on the self-service portal and then looking up in a knowledge base article, which of the many hundreds and hundreds of work groups do I send this to? We're early in our journey. We, of course, do event monitoring, we do statistical analysis, we do data analytics, but we don't do a lot of automation and self-healing, and that's where we're tapping into that. Really understanding that that's how we empower our techs to actually do more and be more, and Nike is all about that. They don't want people to do the same thing day in and day out. Why? Because people don't like that, and then people leave. Nike's all about making their internal employees their biggest consumers as well. We want our employees to be our biggest advocates and shoppers as well. And you can't do that by employing people, whether it's first party, second party, third party, through doing the same routine tasks over and over. And so that's where we want our AI and automation journey to go, is automate those things that we don't need people doing at the end of the day, and make the people do the value add so they come to work excited, just like LeBron does when he comes in to a lab to understand how we're going to make him jump higher or sprint faster or do whatever he needs to do on the court.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for continuing to support Serena. She's one of my personal favorites as well. Just for the benefit of our audience, how long do you think this journey is going to take now that you'll have begun? Where do you see yourself? Will it be like an 18-month plan or much longer?
I think it's much longer. But definitely, I mean, we're very agile. We are a lean environment. And so we're not building this to go big bang. We're building it in sprints. We're building it in phases. And we're just mapping out kind of that next stage of the journey. What with our event management, and what are we doing with incident correlation and problem management, and really identifying those things that we should be weeding out of the environment, taking that to the next level, and then automating those strategically and smartly instead of doing it all at once. And I think that really means it's a continuous journey, and we keep building those phases out. So I see it a multi-year journey.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to shift from IT ops back into industry-grade problems that crowdsourcing platforms are solving for, and I'd like to address this both to you, Diane and Mike. Let's talk a little bit about what are the large-scale industry challenges that crowdsourcing has helped solve for. I mean, it's not just about, hey, I want a promotion added to my app anymore, right? You'll have taken some of the most complex problems where people are not able to solve for within their IT groups or business groups, and taken that back into your platform to solve for. It could be in the banking area, in the healthcare space, or technology space. So either one of you would like to go first.
Yeah, sure, I'll go. This answer comes really being touched by Ken's speech that he started out with in the last presentation.
Absolutely.
It's in the medical space, and it touches all of us. And it's predictive medicine. So to me, that's something that is real in our lifetime, where predictive medicine will affect the way that we live, the way that our kids live. In very significant ways, right? Where you can go in and, your doctor can, while you're at an appointment, tell you what's coming down the pipe for you as it comes to medicine, as it comes to your health. And those problems are incredibly difficult, and they're multifaceted. They hit on the computing power necessary to do them, the speed at which you can solve those problems to make it realistically possible to get an answer within the time frame that matters, and the cost of which you can do it, right? So we've been lucky enough to work on several of the problems with research institutions from Harvard Medical, Harvard Business School. We worked at the Broad Institute, which is and MIT plus Google collaboration. We worked with a number of cancer foundations, and a lot of it has been on speeding up algorithms, right? Taking things that would take days to run and getting them down in milliseconds, and taking the power of what used to be only possible on huge supercomputers down to running on a laptop. Literally, one problem we did went from a supercomputer to a laptop, 1,000 times improvement, and that was something that we did for a pharmaceutical company. And then it was open source. It was such a dramatic increase that they open sourced the solution, so everybody else could benefit from it. But just things, I think one thing I'm really proud to be a part of with our collaboration with Harvard is we now have algorithms that can identify and detect cancerous tumors as accurate. Okay, so my words, as accurate as an average oncologist. Okay, that's pretty great. But what's really even greater is the algorithm will get better. The algorithm will get smarter. So if we're as good as an average one today, we're going to be the best. The algorithm will be the best. And that's something where a few years ago, you would hear futurist talks about, someday, wouldn't it be cool if, I could go in and get scanned and find out, that day is now, right? So I think that those pursuits are being powered by crowdsourcing in most cases, right? Not all of the top order, but where people are reaching out to external expert communities to solve incredibly difficult problems. We heard a lot of them today. Steve gave an amazing talk about some of the things at NASA, the X Prize Foundation and what they're trying to solve. But I'll pass it on to Diane.
Diane, over to you.
Yeah, it's just inspiring, right? When you look across the span of the work that's being done, it's inspiring. And I think my favorite work too, we gravitate to healthcare, right? So, we're solving problems similar to, the big industrial and scientific work, right? In some of our industries for GE. So you see work that spans, engines and turbines and energy. But again, my favorite examples are found in the healthcare industry. And the one example that I'll give is, again, it combines the cloud and AI, right? It's where we've deployed a solution recently where we can equip physicians, right, at the point of care with real-time access to both treatment decisions that are made by their cohorts, other physicians in their healthcare system. We combine that with a lot of records and cost information in order to provide that physician in real time with guidance regarding how they can provide the best possible treatment for that patient in front of them. And it's very simple. It's a small ribbon at the top of the screen that they're looking at while they're in the room with their patient, and it's stoplight. It's red, yellow, green. So if you're in the green, you just keep on keeping on. If it's yellow or red, you can double click into the detail and you can see what your cohorts, your colleagues in your healthcare system have been prescribing for patients with similar conditions. And so you can, in real time, evaluate what tests, what truly constitutes best in class. So it's helping a physician that might be newer, that might not be quite as tenured. It provides them with real-time guidance regarding what some of their more tenured colleagues might suggest for patients with that kind of symptom. So again, it's combining your crowdsourcing expertise, real relevant expertise from a relevant cohort with cloud-based computing, with AI. That system is learning constantly, and it's updating the treatment guidance in real time so that, once again, that patient is getting the best possible care that they can, given all the levers that might be contributing to the care in that facility. So again, it's combining crowdsourcing, AI, and cloud for a better outcome. And it's just, it can be applied, that approach can be applied to anything. It can be applied to operations. It can be applied really to anything that has a human element.
Absolutely. And I think, healthcare has been a challenge in some of the developing countries. Something like this is almost a no-brainer, whether it's Africa or even some remote places in India, which are not very accessible by all healthcare technicians.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to cut over a little bit and talk about crowdsourcing and the trends in crowdsourcing. I have a couple of pointed questions. On the bell curve, where do you see the people in the room today? Are they the leaders? Have we reached the middle of the bell curve, or are we right at the beginning? And I'd like both of you to answer that. And where are we on the journey of security? Are people still questioning it, or are they comfortable now to move forward from their enterprise standpoint when there's stuff which they have to take on to the crowd and bring it back? Brandon, would you like to go?
Okay, so I think taking those probably in two pieces in terms of using crowdsourcing. So I'd say we've moved. So I've been working with Topcoder for, I want to say 8-10 years. So it's been a long journey and seen a lot with y'all. I think what's really moving people up that curve in a hurry is, in fairness, I think you guys paid the model paid a price because of the change in economy. So when the economy was struggling, getting talent was not nearly the kind of challenge it is now. It is.
Looking at my gray hair.
I'm sorry. I'm getting it. It's just right here, right now.
The challenges and the payment price. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of this is again a bit of its timing, but we're seeing a number of trends that kind of fit into this. One, I think getting access to that talent is one. I think some key things that Diane kind of hit on. And Sharon did is in terms of where people want, what problems they want to work on. That's also becoming much, much more important. So I'm seeing more and more people going and moving to a gig economy. We see that in our business, for example, just in the way our company runs, we're fully virtual, so we have no offices anywhere in the globe. At a company of about 400 people, we're in 45 countries, and we're able to do it because the tools are there. We're also able to attract talent because while we're not quite the gig economy, we're kind of like that half step in that direction of, hey, when we get together every 9 months, we have a session, everyone that is around, how do you do local farming? Because we have farmers that work at GitLab, right? And that is a dichotomy that's like completely undoable until you get into a gig economy, until you get into where we're going. So I think, one, I'm seeing it come up pretty quickly. This is one that is harder for bigger companies. So bluntly, as best I know, it's hard for a big company to shift from, I want to see you and I want to know your work and I want to be able to touch you, to, hey, this is just here's what we want to execute. I'm comfortable with you executing it. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter if you get it done, if you can pay that person. We're kind of wired to think, well, we should pay you for time, and we've got to continue to shift for paying for results. Because the truth of the matter is, your best result, if someone can do it in 5 minutes and you pay them 10 times more than what you pay someone to get a worse result in a week, it doesn't matter. So I think there's that shift is coming, but it's well up there. I think if we see another, as the economy becomes hard to get good people, it's become much, much more common.
So before you answer that, so do you agree that larger companies, because GE has GE Genius Link, so I'm just wondering, do you see that larger companies are more hesitant than the others?
No, I'll respectfully disagree. I think it's harder to move the bigger companies en masse. But I think you see entrepreneurs and evangelists, right, and rule breakers in the big companies, and they're really your evangelists for change. But it takes longer to get that battleship shifted around and get whole scale adoption. But I would say that, well, I remember when we were starting our open innovation program at GE, of course, the first phone call we made was to Mike and team. And then, we were reading a lot of the best practices that were coming out of Nike, right? So we were taking a lot of our notes from NASA and Nike and Microsoft, right?
Right. So I believe, crowdsourcing is used much more for pointed problems rather than mass transition is what you're seeing as a trend, basically.
Well, historically, but I think there are some of us that are personally committed to making crowdsourcing mainstream and making crowdsourcing boring, right? So the more that we can help organizations understand how to embed crowdsourcing and open innovation and freelancing as mainstay resourcing tools, right, that can scale, that are compliant, which they can and they are, but organizations don't know, yet how to put all that together. Then I think, job done. But we have, of course, everybody in this room, I'm sure, is at the advanced end of that curve. But yeah, I think collectively we have a ways to go before everything's mainstream.
Sure. I'm going to come back to you, Mike. I want to hear from you where you feel your customers are on the bell curve.
Okay. Sorry, Diane, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit.
Go for it. Go for it.
That's the idea, isn't
it? It'd be poor form for me to make fun of anybody, so I'll make fun of everybody. It's terrible. Nobody is on the advanced side of the curve. And there's a simple reason for it. For the top 13s here, I've spent years, and there's this one word that always surrounds the trouble that we've seen. And we have the charts of, the business, and it's like, oh, it's growing. It's growing. That spiky chart that's going back and forth. And, but the one word that surrounds all of that is risk, right? And it's most people will spend more time trying to minimize the effects of failure that they sacrifice almost all the benefits of success. Okay? So it's like, how do I, everyone people talk about failing fast and all that, but it's like, how do I fail fast and have it not be painful? Well, guess what? It's probably not worth it. Like, it's got to be a little bit painful. It's got to be painful. Like, you got to be risking something, right. Put something out there. And I, as many times as, I just, word of advice, you lose me for probably 15 seconds when you use the word pilot. Like, my brain just, it goes blank. So, yeah. Get a little bit of the neck. But I'm serious, because it's like one of those things where, if you're at home, and, we're a family of 4 kids, so 6 of us, and, let's say we found this new food that tastes great. It was really easy to cook. It was so healthy. It was organic, had tons of protein, all the things that we needed. So, we'll eat that food when we have nothing else left. That's like what people do every day with crowds. This is amazing. I can't believe it. So you're saying I can get access to the best talent in the globe. That's amazing. Why have this totally meaningless project over here that I'd like to try it out? Right?
Yeah, that I can't hire people for. So we'll go try that.
So, yeah. And it's I've seen the switch too. And I actually haven't met him in person yet, but I just, last few weeks, I've been talking with Paul Estes from Microsoft. And you got a chance to spend time with him this week. And it was like him and I just had the same battle scars. Mm-hmm. And he is pushing an agenda inside of a really big organization. And he calls it, it's kind of like, we're a cult. and we're trying to get people to believe in us. And it's starting to happen. But in my opinion, we're as a group, as an industry, as people in this room, everybody, we're way on the low end of the advancement curve.
Yeah, but I guess the good news is that the group here has begun the journey. So they are probably going to be the leaders as the way paves along.
By the way, I agree with you. I just didn't want anyone charging the stage.
All right, with that, let's cut over. So Jenny, are we going to be able to run the poll right now? How are we doing? Okay, good. So let's run the one. I'd like to see what the audience thinks about the trends in digital. Can we have that up? You'll have to go to kahoot.it and enter the passcode, which is 4677594, and pick the option which you think is most relevant. You can start. Is everybody ready? Let's start.
In the meantime, we'll all karaoke.
Put back the Imagine Dragons.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, they're asking if you can go back and rerun it. I guess some people didn't get the code. Sorry about that.
Write it down on your paper.
4677594.
So I don't actually know what we're doing.
We are actually running a poll to see what the audience considers as their as the trends in digital are. So you'll see the results. What you see out there are just their initials, because everybody logs in, they get an initial, these are just the players running.
They're all using their real names.
Yeah,
The doctor.
I thought we were supposed to do the hustle. No?
No, not right just now. Not with your broken foot. Come on.
Sitting down, I'm good.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and start it right now so everybody can play. Yeah, we're basically asking the audience to challenge you and whether they agree or not with the trends that you just outlined. So we have AI, which you spoke about.
Yes.
We've got a challenge running on AR for 7-Eleven today at the Innovation Top Coder Open.
Thank you, Susan.
All right, last 2 seconds. Let's see what the graph looks like. Sorry, Diane, but the audience believes that connecting it all, IoT, is where the trend's going to be.
Well, the wisdom of the crowd.
Absolutely. So I guess, well, that's that. I'm going to, cut over and move to a slightly different topic and talk about challenges. Digital is great. The trends are great. Everybody is trying to, move their digital journeys along. But each of us are at a different level of maturity and run into different kind of challenges, whether it be from securing funds or to determining how the return on investment is going to work out. So I know, Mike, you recently spoke at MIT on your learnings and challenges and what you might have changed to do things differently. So why don't we start with you, and then we will go around the room with the others.
Yeah, so I had this talk at MIT, which is kind of intimidating, right? And it was the week that we were at Harvard. Diane actually drove me to MIT.
I did, yes. I'm waiting for the tip.
You're going to have the app like Uber, which keeps sending the reminder back,
Yes.
But I did this talk, right? That ended up being my favorite talk because it was about failures, right? Like all the failures, and everybody loves to hear the story of a true nasty failure, right? And so two of them, I'll tell you two, just keep it short. But one was that in this new economy that we're in, is that platforms have to be truly digital. And that was something that we learned over time. We were always digital when it came to our community. And everything that they did, it was always, it was pure, and it was crowdsourced, it was market dynamics. Everything was completely digital. And we never did the same thing on the customer side, right? It was very traditional. It was like, well, we'll go out, we'll sit down with you, and we'll whiteboard things, and and we spent a lot of time catching up. And I said that was the learning that we had. And we should, from the very beginning, we should have been as pure on both sides of our marketplace. And I find a lot of companies in this space, in our space, make this mistake where they call themselves a two-sided marketplace, but they fool themselves if they're not truly digital. And one of our CTO, Dave, who was up earlier, he has a good saying, like, if you have to be able to express it in API. Right, like it has to be. There may be something behind the scenes that's a little ugly, but it has to be API and accessible. And that was one of the learnings that we've had over time. And now we're seeing way more advances in how we do things because people can build on top of it, they can change it, and that's the definition of a platform, right? I should be able to go and make new inventions on top of platforms, make new products. And even you see it in Uber, right? So Uber Eats, one of my jokes I say to the team sometimes is like, hey, we launched Uber Eats before we launched Uber. Like, that was kind of stupid, And so I think that's one lesson. And then the second one, I'll be quick, is trends don't lie. So, we've been doing this for a long time. We went through a lot of pain. But if I look back at some of the things that we did fail at, if we just looked at the trends, you have to have an equal amount of heart and brain, right? You got to be passionate about what you're doing and use your heart to drive that passion and decide what you're interested in, what you should work on. But you have to keep yourself honest. And I have more of this than this, but I have people around me that have more of this. And that's what we kind of learned is, we have those spiky trends like this, like run away. There's something really wrong, blow it up, change it, and keep on trying until you get the right trend, and then put the gas in the right trend. So.
You guys just have to start driving in India. Trust me, it's exactly like that. It's up and down. Okay. Sharon, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about securing funding and the ROI for these digital initiatives. Because it is so hard, it's a difficult conversation when they've got, you'd go to a customer or to your leadership and say, hey, I'm going to reduce the friction. So how do you measure it? How am I going to go and ask for that funding? And I'm sure everybody in this room at some point or the other has a great idea on the digital side, but they're struggling to go and get that investment made from their leadership. So can you talk to us a little bit about what's going on in that space and if you've run into that before?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to understand what's important to the company. What's the company's objectives? What are their North Star or their milestones? At Nike, we believe everybody every individual with a body is an athlete. Not just Serena, not just LeBron, but everyone who has a body is an athlete. And because of that, people are a really important part of our culture. And that is important to the Nike executives and to the people who potentially are approving the funding for anything in the digital transformation space. So I think you've got to understand what's important to the company. Cost is important to everyone. However, if your company is profitable, as Nike is, they have a lot of money to spend. It's just showing them where the value is to them. Part of technology operations and part of the importance in how I get funding for tech vending machines and smart lockers and things that are kind of making our lives a little bit easier, but costs money to implement, is letting that leadership team be the customer. Make sure that you're showing them how it's influencing not just them, but who works for them, the engineers, the designers. How is this going to make their jobs easier? How is it going to make them more productive? And at the end of the day, that's what's going to drive the bottom line. We're going to get shoes out faster. We're going to have sleeker designs. At the end of that, that means I can solve technical issues faster, and the techs are engaged and empowered. But that's what I would say along the lines of ROI. It really is different for every single company because what drives the company is so different, and what your executives are looking for may be different. But you've got to be able to tell that story in a way that's meaningful. And I'll use proof of concept instead of pilot, but do what you can with what you get. So in order to roll out, I mentioned tech vending and smart lockers. In order to roll that out, I didn't go for full global funding. What I went for was funding a small proof of concept. Once my proof of concept gets done, nobody can stop it, right? They'll be signing the check because I will have the proof in the pudding. I will have that ROI bleeding through the statistics because they will have lived it. We say a lot, or I say a lot to my team, satisfied customers is not our goal. Raving fans is our goal. Why? Because those are the people who don't just say, that was nice, and they move on. They tell other people about it. And that's how you get the people who sign the check at the end of the day to sign it. Because those raving fans are saying, wow, look at what they're doing in their space. Wow, look at what they did for me. And that's how we drive things forward. Innovation, digital transformation.
Right. I think those inputs were very helpful about putting your leadership, and their thought processes, and kind of integrate them into your journey of digital so they can relate to what's going on. So Brandon, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, you've got the customer side and you've got the entire development community side. Right? Your platform kind of brings everybody together through the entire continuous integration CI/CD process. Sure. So what are the challenges that you see that the customers are talking about or the user communities are talking about? Are they similar? Are they different? And what are you hearing out there?
Yeah, so the good news about, I think the term, if you think it's called shift left, meaning more decisions being made by developers. So if we think about that, developers versus code on what's delivered, the challenge that we're seeing, and it's one just being worked out, is if you ask one developer, or if you ask 10 developers what tool they want to use, they'll give you 12 answers. The challenge is for the team that has to run it, right? The operations team. That's kind of what we're seeing work out right now. And the challenge is, you want to keep the talent, you want to empower the developer. At the same point, you have to, take care of the insanity of whatever they say they want to run. And so I think if there's a tension there, and I think we're seeing it play out a whole lot where companies want to move quickly, needing to have some opinionated way for them to interact, right? And so that's kind of the world we sit in between. But that pattern, I think, is going to continue to play out, at least in how developers work with operations, so in the dev and ops side, how those two work together. There's a lot of good trends on both sides, making it a little bit easier. So there's a lot more transparency between them. I think Kubernetes, I came from Google, started that project with the team there. That's starting to allow operations capabilities go back up to the dev. Actually, you can see into the operations environment. But I think those are far from fully decided, but I think that's the big trend, is how it's going to play out between the two. You need the developers, you need them happy, you want them productive. The answer may not be, I would say, may not be giving them any tool they feel like. Because the challenge is that's good for that developer. The next developer that comes along doesn't like it. And so to some degree, there's some, how you marry that is something that we're seeing a lot of companies working through right now.
Sure. I'm going to run the last audience poll at this point, where you all will vote about what you'll think are the top challenges that you all are facing today. And while they get that up and running and their passcode. It's 3080. 927. Does everybody have that? There we go. So while we get everybody on that, Mike, I'm just going to ask you one question, which we'll try to address while everybody logs in, is that, you spoke about that spike and that curve which keeps coming along, right? So is there something called as a repeatable and sustainable? Is there a playbook in digital, or is there not one?
That's a tough one. I think there is a playbook, but it has to be. We've seen success. It has to be customized for organizations. I mean, Diane, what do you think? We've done it together at GE
Yeah,
a little bit.
yeah.
There's a playbook.
I do, and to your point, it is. It needs to be contextualized, right? So culture matters. So you have a great set of playbooks, and your team does a great job walking clients through the plays, right, and to the goal. But context matters, and so you have to contextualize the playbook so that so that it doesn't hit Oregon reject when it hits the client company's operations. But there are playbooks, and they have to be customized.
Okay. That's at least good to know for those who have been trying to build a repeatable process. So we're going to run this survey, and I've already got my warning to wrap it up. So we'll do a last question after this, and we'll wrap it up. But what's the biggest challenge in achieving digital transformation today from each of your industries? Is it funding, ROI, availability of skilled resources with the latest technologies, cultural shift, velocity of change? 30 seconds. We're down to the last 15. All right. So the number one challenge which has come up is that of cultural shift. So Diane, I'm going to address the very last question for this panel to you. Culturally, what is going on for the acceptance of change? Is there any diversity? Is diversity an important element? How is inclusion being addressed? Can you touch about all these three factors and how they tie into the cultural shift required to achieve digital transformation?
How much time do we have? Yeah, no, absolutely. Kind of a no-brainer that cultural shift really showed up in a big way, but I think Ken's talk was important as well. Cognitive diversity, right, and the diversity of experience and perspective and expertise is really essential to success in the digital era. You need to be able to really knit together an ecosystem model that allows you to shift out to nodes of expertise and capacity and solutions in a way that is much more agile, much more effective than work of the past. So I think that culturally, see how this is all coming together? Culturally, that's difficult for organizations to really institutionalize, more so for larger companies than smaller, kind of medium-sized companies. But it's a challenge for us all. But I think if you are able to put together an operational model that is configured more out of a respect for an ecosystem, whether that's an ecosystem of individuals or organizations, ideally both, right? It really is, the future of work is now, right? It's the crowd, it's the cloud, it's AI, but it is the ability to align your culture to one that respects and embraces the expertise and the solutions and the capacity of your partner network is the organization that's going to win, in my opinion.
Sure. Well, with that brings us to the end of the panel discussion today. And, Mike was talking about this being a cult. So I had a question. What does religion and paid search engines have in common?
Wow.
Well, they both want you to
I'm literally
convert.
answering while I'm
They both want you to convert. So convert, disrupt, and be digital. And if this panel wasn't warm and toasty enough, take those hands, rub them up, and give a big round of applause for our panelists today. Thank you so much for joining us. Hand it over to Aaron.
Convert. I love it.
What? Thank you, Javier. Once again, a big round of applause for Vasudha, our panelists, our moderator, and all of our panelists. That's the end of it. Thank you all for hanging in there. We know we had quite a few people who had to leave early. I guess there's some pending storms up northeast. Thank you all for making today exciting. This is going to be my final farewell before I bring Mike Morris, our CEO up to give the conclusion. But I want to recognize just a couple of individuals who made today successful. So standing in the back of the room, all those individuals from the Top Coder team and Wipro, wave your hands with those black vests on. Right. Allison from the Renaissance. Thank you all. Great team. They helped me immensely. But a special recognition to two individuals who probably are tired of me and we're going to have to give raises or bonuses to, Mike, because they put up with me and helped me pull us together. Darlene Clark from Ohana. Raise your hand, Darlene. And my new partner in crime, who is not, I don't think she's even been here 6 months at Top Coder, but she has dealt with me and helped me immensely. My sidekick, my ace that holds it down. Give it up for Alexis Sleet. Thank you both so much. It's been great hosting you all. Thank you for letting me be your master of ceremonies. And now for our official closing remarks, the man with the plan, Mike Morris.
Right on there. There you go. Okay, hang on one second. How about this guy? Yeah. Energy, starting. Do you want to lead somebody, like show them how to do the floss before we leave? Yeah. I'm going to keep this quick. I do have one thing that's not Top Coder related, though, but that since it's Thanksgiving coming up. But first, you are all, Aaron, the state of crowdsourcing? Okay. You are all going to get a report on the way out as part of a gift from us. It is a document called the State of Crowdsourcing. And it's a collaboration. We contributed to it. Harvard Business School, Spigot was involved, GE was involved, NASA was involved, Deloitte, several thought leaders in the space of crowdsourcing. And to me, I mean, it's an in-depth, it's sort of a playbook, but it's an in-depth look at why is this important? What should I do? What are the big reasons and big objections? How do I get past them? The goal of this piece is to put crowdsourcing on the map. And I think that people will take notice when they read it, and it becomes as boring as Diane was saying. It can make crowdsourcing boring. So please read it. I think it'll give you an in-depth understanding, kind of an executive education course on crowdsourcing. So that is number one. And the second thing is we have Thanksgiving coming up next week. So I have a suggestion to everybody. I didn't plan on saying this, it just came up at the end. I was just thinking about it. So every year, this might not shock the people that know me, but you get to somebody's house and you eat a lot and you drink a lot and you maybe watch some football. So we've changed it up. My wife and I, a few years ago, we have the Turkey Olympics. So it's a set of games that we do. We have kids and grown-ups, everyone from last year we had 6-year-old up to 72-year-old competing. So things like go out and do a basketball free throw shot. We have a few hockey players, hockey shot, Pictionary, trivia, and at the end of it, we give out trophies. But what we found is it's just made, it's one of those things where every year I think about it, I got to go sit down and figure out what are the teams going to be. One year we did Harry Potter. One year we did sports teams. But it's a pain in the neck. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it. But then at the end of it, every year, it ends up being so much fun. So maybe you can take that. And if you have a big crew getting together at Thanksgiving, put some fun into it, make a trophy. There always has to be a winner. There is a winner in life. And that would be just a little parting suggestion. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all spending the day with us. If there's anybody that is interested, a group of us are going to be heading from here pretty quickly out to the South Fork Ranch in Allen to see the finals of the Top Coder Open. So while we've been here, 100 of the world's best designers, developers, and data scientists are competing in a venue, in an arena, live right now. And we will have the winners announced, I believe, or completed somewhere in the 2:30 range, and we'll have awards around 4 o'clock. I know it's a long day and it's a Friday, but if anybody is interested, you're all absolutely invited. Any of the Top Coder people can give you details of how to get there. It's not far. It's about 15 minutes from here. Not too bad. But it is a neat thing. So thank you, and have a great weekend. Have a great holiday next week, and be safe in your travels.